You'll often hear in the university is that we have a solution, but we're looking for a problem, which is the reverse of how typically a startup should be done. I think most businesses work at human years, large organizations. Startups need to work in dog years. You need to do things 7 times faster. But universities work in snail years. Actually taking something to production is a whole different ballgame. And getting your first customer is a huge challenge.
Welcome to the Academic Adventures podcast. This podcast is all about the journey from teaching, research and innovation to real-world solutions. For Season 2, we are joined by experienced founders and other experts who work alongside university staff and students to help create and support a culture of enterprise on campus. Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the second season of the Academic Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Sarah McCluskey, and my guest today is Nanik Ramchandani. Inspired by the 80s movie Wall Street, Nanik initially became a stockbroker before discovering the world of entrepreneurship. His career in financial services has taken him around the world, including Dubai, Singapore and Geneva, before he settled in Edinburgh and developed his relationship with Edinburgh Napier University. This collaboration has included being an entrepreneur in residence, and he also helped to establish the Scottish Centre for Excellence in Digital Trust. He is now working alongside academic co-founder Zakwan Jaroucheh to spin out cybersecurity company Lasting Asset. In our conversation, Nanik shares the realities of building a university spin-out, from legal wrangles to building solid financial foundations. We also talk about why spin-outs need more support to get beyond proof of concept and land their first customer, and how universities might attract and incentivise more commercial champions. Welcome to the podcast, Nanik. It's fantastic to have you here. I wonder if we could begin by hearing a bit about yourself, who you are and what you do.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sarah. Likewise, lovely to be here. I'm Nanik Ramchandani. I'm currently this co-founder and CEO of a business that's just spun out of Edinburgh Napier University 77 days ago. And I'm counting. It's a business called Lasting Asset, where we're on a mission to stop imposter fraud, imposter or impersonation fraud. In America, they like to call it imposter. Here, we call it impersonation. But that's why I'm, of course, the long journey to get to where I am, but we can talk about that as it goes along. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for setting the scene there. I love that you are still counting it in numbers of days since it started.
So the clock starts the day you spin out, and the pace increases to a 3x or 4x, which people don't necessarily realize. So I keep counting and keep reminding my team. It's been so many days. My God, we haven't done what we should have. So let's keep it going. Yeah.
Yes, I feel like it's almost like they talk about politicians and things. The first 100 days, I imagine it's a similar crazy time. Yes. So this is not your first foray into doing financial technology type businesses, is it? So maybe if you could tell us a little bit about your background and how you've ended up here.
Yeah, sure. It's a long story. Going back some 25 odd years, and I was in India. That's where I grew up. And in my early teens, there was a movie called Wall Street, which kind of was the movie of the era, which kind of shaped a lot of careers, including mine, where there was this character called Gordon Gekko, and everybody was like, my God, this is like the hero. He was actually a villain in there. But it was like, yeah, it started my career in financial services. I was always comfortable with numbers, and that was right here at that point that what I wanted to do was run my own hedge fund and so on. But so my first job after doing my master's was working with a stockbroker. This is like 99, and my biggest client said, hey, I've just invested in a .com, so come and run it for me. So this is 99, and so we started what was then capital market education site and also a social media site, which was interesting because both those categories were exploded after. And so that was my first introduction to startups. Absolutely loved it. Then the world changed in 2001, and I continued to work on different startup ideas, including tutoring kids in the US from India, doing book reviews. Amazon was getting big then. But finally in 2003, decided to go back to business school. And that started a 15-year career in financial services. Long story short, I did run the hedge fund that I always wanted to do, and Murphy's Law, things never go as planned. Realized this was not what I really was inspired to do, and midlife crisis just got back to my true love of startups. So that's been the backward journey. But 2018-19, I was working, giving some advice, doing some consulting work with scale-ups mostly in the financial sector. And that was also the time we had moved to Edinburgh, which is now home, and somehow got involved with Napier, and that started my new journey in entrepreneurship, commercialization, and so on.
Yeah. So tell us a bit more about that. So your connection has really been with Napier University. How did that start? What sorts of things have you done together?
Yeah, no, it was a very serendipitous, interesting story. Way back in 2019-20, I was working and advising different startups and scale-ups. And we had moved to Edinburgh at the time. And so there was an entrepreneur in resident at Napier at the time, Jamie Graves, who was leaving. It was end of the year. It was end of 2021. And he was helping us project at the time run by a young, bright PhD called Pavlos. And somehow we got in touch, and Jamie asked if I had time to support him. Pavlos and I got along really well. And that just started. I became a commercial champion to support Pavlos, which was now at that stage, we were applying for the high growth spinout opportunity qualification grant. It went on to get the company creation grant and an Innovate UK cyber ASAP grant. So it kind of just grew arms and legs. And around the same time, I also met Bill Buchanan. And if you don't know Bill, he's like a force of nature in Scotland. He's one of the pillars of Napier, been working there for 36 years as a professor. Absolutely loves what he does. Like, he's got more energy than a 17-year-old on his first date. And just an incredible human being. And I ended up working with Bill on a bunch of things, including setting up the first Centre of Excellence in Digital Trust in Scotland, where Napier is the founding university alongside Glasgow and University of Edinburgh. Bill also got me to apply for the Royal Society Entrepreneur in Residence scheme. So I was the Royal Society EIR in 23-24 at Napier. Also got involved with the second project where Zakwan, who's now my co-founder at Lasting Asset, was working on a bunch of different problems. And I worked alongside with him over the last 2 years in, again, getting multiple rounds of funding, getting the project from what was an initial idea on crypto asset custody to now stopping financial fraud. So it's been a very intense 4 years where somehow I've just gotten involved with Napier and gotten intertwined in this system there.
Yeah, it sounds like that really was a meeting of minds, and then it's just gone off in various different directions. So This company that you're involved in now was a spin out from the university. So tell us a bit more about the story behind that. You've mentioned it a little bit.
Yes. So in 2023, Zakwan was working on creating a better digital asset custody solution. So essentially in crypto assets, if you lose your private key, you lose your assets. So he wanted to make a better custody solution. And he had made some good strides in that direction. But it was a really hard problem to commercialize. And also we realized that it wasn't something that really excited us. Like, we didn't wake up every morning wanting to protect crypto assets. And that we had applied for grants. We got the high growth spinout opportunity qualification for that, where we explored multiple use cases. And one of the things you'll often hear in the university is that we have a solution, but we're looking for a problem, which is the reverse of how typically a startup should be done. But it is a challenge, which is not unsurmountable. It just requires a lot more thinking about what problem is it that our technology can solve well versus just any technology solving. And that kind of led to this passion to stop fraud. Around the same time in 23, my mother was scammed, and I saw what it did to her. So it was one of those things where it just came together that this is a problem we want to solve, and this is a problem we can see ourselves doing for the next 20 years. And that project went on within the university to raise almost £500,000 in different grants, and now has spun out as of 77 days ago, as I probably mentioned. And we're now out to hopefully get our product launched in the next 60 to 90 days.
Fantastic. What a great story. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that develops. So is this your first experience of spinning out a company from a university rather than a company that was already running or doing it just completely independently. And how has that process been? Has it been different?
Oh yeah, how much time do we have? Another 5 hours? Yeah, it is the first one which I've actually spun out. I was involved in the previous project as well, which was the one that I mentioned between 2021 and 2023. That hasn't spun out yet, but should spin out soon. They've had some other technical and financial challenges to surmount. But the spin out process is definitely not an easy one. I think it's getting better. Napier has done a lot of spin-outs before in the cybersecurity space. So they've got history in doing it, but it's still fairly clunky in terms of the negotiation process, which happens like 24 months too late, to be honest. It should be very clear at the beginning of what it involves and so on. Even the whole legal documentation process. It just feels like it's just far too onerous for the stage it is at. So if you look at startups in the US, there's a typical YC document template, which is a 5-pager for safe notes, which is how every startup literally starts in the US. It's so easy. Everybody knows it. It's a quick sign and you're done. So university spinouts are harder. I think I lost about half my hair and the rest became gray through that 3-month process of actually looking through about 200 pages of legal docs.
Goodness.
I think that can be definitely made easier.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not great, but I think it's getting better. I definitely believe it's getting better.
Yeah. Oh, I hope so. So how has your partner in this business, how have they found this process? Is it what they expected? This whole perceptions versus reality idea?
Yeah. I think perception versus reality is interesting because I think there are two sides to it. One is as a business, what it takes to start up a business, and then what it takes to spin out. So there are two different things I look at it. I think in this particular case, from my co-founder's perspective, what really worked well with us is that we trusted each other for our domains. And this is one of the things, like when I do some angel investing on the side or whatever, when I look at people who I would invest in, it'd be people who are very self-aware. They know what they're good at, and then they know what the other person brings to the table, and they then leave each other to it. There's no sense at that stage to try and do it. So I don't basically, my co-founder didn't necessarily spend much time on the legal documentation or the stuff at all. He left that to me, and I left him to focus on the tech. So the spin-out process probably wasn't as harrowing for him. But in terms of, I think when it comes to how easy or difficult is it and what it takes to do a business and a startup, most people don't really know until they get into it. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions is it's really easy to make money in a startup. So I think the worst way to make money is set up a startup. Like you can do so much better if you're a PhD or bank qualified to get a job which gives you those holidays and the options or whatever on the pension, versus a startup where 95% probabilities you'll fail after 8 years and after 100-hour weeks and so on. And I think it helps if you've been around the block to realize that it's not easy. And the only reason, therefore, you do a startup is because you love the problem that you're trying to solve. Otherwise, it's very hard to survive a startup, to be honest. So yeah, I don't know if I said that really deep.
Yeah, so you're painting a picture of a really challenging process there. Sounds like it's something that's not for the faint-hearted, but that's where I guess specialists, experts, people like you who've been through it before are incredibly valuable.
Yeah, I think it definitely helps. There's a lot in Scotland. Scotland's a great ecosystem, and I've lived in like more than 10 places across the world. So whether it's East Coast US or Singapore, Dubai or Geneva or whatever, like I worked and lived in multiple parts of the world. And I think the Scottish ecosystem is incredible for getting you off the ground, especially if you're within the university. But what happens is that it's not necessarily great in terms of giving you a reality check on how hard it is. And so the way I like to put it is, in the financial world, there's this thing that dentists make the worst investors, right? Because they're really good at something and it's very straightforward what they do every day. And over a period of time, you start thinking that you can do everything really well. So the reason, like you in the financial world, is like when dentists start day trading, it's a disaster. They lose everything. Yeah, it's one of those things. Similarly, in the academic world, you're really good at something. You've spent a lot of time focusing on that, and you're really good at it. Like you're world renowned, you've written papers, you can talk about it endlessly. But that doesn't necessarily translate into everything else in life, right? And this is what happens sometimes, where the realities of a business are completely different, which is where the self-awareness is so important, that like realizing that you're good at something doesn't mean that you can actually run a business. And a 3-week program on teaching you how is not going to make you an expert either. And so I'm not saying that academics can't be fantastic CEOs. They can. And like Jamie Graves is an incredible example. He built a company called Zone Fox, spun out of Napier, sold it after 10 years to a multi-billion-dollar business. And he went through that 10 years to be the great CEO but it takes that time. That's what I mean. It's almost saying that, okay, you've been to business school for 2 years and I can learn the same thing in 2 weeks. It doesn't work.
Yeah. No, it makes absolute sense, and why you need those experts and things around you. And so if that support that perhaps is out there isn't maybe hitting the spot, what else do you think might be needed to help these people who are interested in developing companies from universities?
So I think the support is, yes, it's not there. As I think there are lots of universities complain that they can't find really good commercial champions. And a part of it is the function of how do you incentivize the commercial champion, because the commercial champion comes in on day one. There's no visibility on any upside on this project. So it's purely a payment for number of days worked. So the question is, and which is typically subsidized to real market rates. And then it's typically 2 days a week maximum for the project. Now, the commercial champion can't leave a full-time job to work 2 days on something. They have to be either be an entrepreneur on their own and be doing something else 3 days a week, or trying to fit that with another project. And as anybody in the startup world would know, once you're in a startup, you can't do anything else. It is a full-time, like intense job. I would say even just fundraising is a full-time job. Now forget the startup being a full-time job. So I think incentivizing the people correctly and having it is extremely important. The second thing, and it's just that ecosystem build-up process where we have great programs on training. We have fairly good initial set of mentors. What could really help is getting the first customer, for example. Like one of the things that most startups struggle with is it's great building in the lab and having a TRL 5 or 6, but actually taking something to production is a whole different ballgame. And getting your first customer is a huge challenge. If the ecosystem helps you get that first customer, and this is where Scottish Government, Scottish Enterprise, all the organizations can help, it would be a game changer. In my view. For example, just to give you an illustration. So we wanted to do a pilot while we were within the university. And it took so many months of back and forth with the insurer of the university to figure out how we would contract with this pilot customer. And we couldn't do it in the end, right? So you have a classic challenge. To raise money, you need traction. But to have traction, you have to do something like sign a contract.
Yeah.
But to the contract, you have to actually be outside the university. Because today I can sign a contract in 1 day. All I need to do. But within the university, 6 months later, I couldn't sign the contract because it was just so complicated.
Yeah.
Because who's taking responsibility? Where does the liability lie? And so on. So it's almost like getting that first customer is such a challenge. And I have tons of ideas on how we can make it easier, but we don't have time for that.
Yeah.
But that could be a game changer. Like how these spinouts really get that acceleration, which is so important, because only advantage as a startup is velocity. Within the university, like I think most businesses work at human years, large organizations. Startups need to work in dog years. You need to do things 7 times faster. But universities work in snail years.
They're definitely the other end of the scale. Yeah.
So within the university, it's like, even though there's so many people who are supporting you, it's just not possible. The systems don't allow it to do things at the space that you need to. And what often happens is it's too late. The market has moved, the technology has moved, and so on. So you can't capitalize on the original opportunity.
Yeah, and that must be particularly challenging in a very fast-moving environment like digital technologies. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I think another thing that you've mentioned a little bit as we've gone through is, yes, there's the support, the tangible, the practical stuff, but then also the finance, getting the finance behind startup companies as well. And it sounds like that's something you've been very successful at doing for the businesses that you're working with. Are there any kind of secrets to that? Or is it all about the technology, the product?
I think the one is, of course, like I said, fundraising is a full-time job. So having a commercial champion who gets numbers, who understands that is really helps. So I've spent most of my life in finance, and most of my job within the university was looking at every grant application I could find, connect with the right people, and so on. So both these startups that I was like projects, I would say, within the university, I was working for, managed to raise over $500,000 in non-dilutive funding. And this was it's huge because nobody else in the university has done that while in the project within the university. Of course, the ecosystems also become better and there's more money. But for example, the one that we've spun out now, we got another 350,000 in an Innovate UK Smart Grant, which where only 2.5% get it in the UK. And it wasn't an easy process. Like we worked really hard. The first time we got rejected, we were below the cutoff of 86%. We got 81. The second time we got 88 or whatever, and we passed it. But it took a lot of work. And I guess we thought through that, listen, we need some funding on day one. And we got that 350. So we managed to get another 250 to get it. So we had now 1 year's money or 15 months money to spin out. Because the challenge on spin out is this classic thing that you out of the university, you need money to get going, but you don't have traction yet. You couldn't do sales while you're within the university. And so this is the classic problem. Like, how do you now raise money? Usually you'll be drip fed unfortunately, in the Scottish ecosystem, you'll get, say, 250 or 100 or so. Now that can't pay for more than two people, right? So if you want to build a business, you need that 1 million, 1.5 million. But how, it's a chicken and egg, how do you get the 1.5 without showing some level of traction? There it becomes really challenging. One thing is, of course, it's a much nascent ecosystem for fundraising here in Scotland. In the US, completely different ballgame. I just spent over 5 weeks in the Silicon Valley, and there it's such a different world in terms of raising. You have to be embedded in the system to raise it, but you can raise based on a really good concept with the right networks, and versus here where not only do you need the traction, you need a 10-year business plan and like a whole bunch of other stuff and so on, 5 patents and so on. So it is much more challenging in terms of fundraising. But like I said, I think the answer is just a lot more dedicated work and looking beyond just Scotland to raise. Those are the important things, which is what we're trying to do. First raise is likely to be in the US. Yeah. It's not Scotland, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh, well, it'll be interesting to see how your company develops and whether that might be an interesting model for other people to learn, whether there might be any particular lessons there which are going to be useful going forward. So you've got this company now that you're spinning out. Are you still involved with doing other projects at Napier University?
So I was till the end of May, I was still doing 1 day a week supporting the Center of Excellence in Digital Trust, which I helped get together with Bill. But the reality of startup is I just don't have time to do anything else. It's like I said, Monday morning, I'm already looking at my to-do list for the week, and I'm like, there's no way I can finish it this week. Yeah, fortunately and unfortunately, I think one of the things which I probably referred to earlier is anything which is 1 day or 2 days, which a lot of commercial champion or other things don't end up being 1 or 2 days. We stretch. And it's really hard. I find it really hard to manage the time. Some people are really good. They'll say, Fridays, I'll just do this. Yeah. I find it really hard. If I see an email, I just want to respond now. I can't wait till Friday kind of thing. So I gave that up because now I'm 100% on this because this is it. This is my passion. This is what I'll be breathing and living for the next, whenever till we survive. Hopefully we will. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good place to wrap up our conversation then. So I really look forward to seeing how this develops and where it ends up going. And good luck with that to-do list. If people want to find out more about you, the work that you do, whereabouts would be a good place to go and look?
LinkedIn is the go-to resource for anybody. So that I'm fairly easy to find on LinkedIn. I'm pretty good in connecting if people like me that 300 character on like why, because otherwise it becomes too much. But I think our website is lastingasset.com, lastingasset.us. We are going to be launching a new brand perhaps in the next 60, 90 days, which is still in stealth mode, but it will be all over LinkedIn when it does come out. So yeah, LinkedIn is the best way. I'm also always happy to support young startup founders, entrepreneurs. I've been over the last couple of years, at Lasting Asset, we won the People's Choice Award and were the finalist at Santander X, we made it to the top 12 out of 1,560. We won the Futures Tech Award from Cisco at Converge in 23. We've been around the block as far as pitching goes. So if I can help, I love to help young startup entrepreneurs in any way I can. So if anything I can do which doesn't take up a full day, it's like pro bono, I don't charge for any of that. So like I'm happy to support the ecosystem.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to reach out, please feel free to.
That's a fantastic offer, and I'm sure some people will take you up on it. So thank you so much for taking the time to come along and tell us about the work that you do.
Pleasure, Sarah. Thank you so much. It was great chatting with you.
If you've been inspired by this podcast, head over to our LinkedIn page and tell us about your biggest takeaways. You'll find a link in the show notes or just search for the Academic Adventures podcast. This podcast is a collaboration between the University of the West of Scotland, Converge and Sarah McCluskey, working in partnership with Ross Tuffy and the Connect Ed Network. The podcast team includes Orla Kelly, Adam Kosterka, Jen Black and me, Sarah McCluskey. This season of the Academic Adventures podcast is supported by the Scottish Funding Council.